heard his boss telling his colleagues that he slept with me last night. Now I'm finished.
I lost my 23-year relationship in a second. He overheard his boss bragging about last night W/me. The man I had an affair with boldly bragged about our relationship on the phone, and my husband found out about it. Right now, I have lost my husband due to his foolishness. I wish I never went on that path because it has cost me a great loss. The friendship I built almost all my life is gone. My name is Eva, and I am 38 years old. I am a chef, and I own a small eatery. The name of my husband is David. David and I had been married for 8 years now, but we had known each other for over 23 years now. David is 40 years old. My husband works in estate management. The first time we met was when we were in high school. It was very much a love-hate meeting at first. I didn't like David because he was always surrounded with people. The most popular girls in school were always around him. So I never really liked that. I never really had an encounter with him in school up till one day I saw him crying after school. I didn't know what was wrong with him, and I wanted to make sure that he was okay. David opened up to me and told me that he had problems at home with his family. I felt for him because the divorce that his parents were having was taking a toll on him. I didn't know what that felt like because I had a happy home with my mother and father so in love. That day I stayed with David and made sure he was okay before going home. From there, we became friends. He could see me in school and we could talk and have lunch together. The people in school became surprised about our sudden friendship, but I never cared to explain it to them, and neither did he. I could always invite him to my house to eat, and he liked it. I introduced him to my family and everybody loved him. Our friendship continued to grow even after school. David was the type of guy that had everyone around him because he was good looking. He had girlfriends throughout the time we were together, and I never liked them. A few months after high school, we went to the same community college, and it was then I started developing feelings for my best friend. People who saw us together could mistake us being in a relationship, but he had always brushed it off. So I kept my feelings to myself because I didn't want to lose my friendship over it. Going forward, I became jealous of the attention he gave his girlfriends. It was getting too much for me. Anytime I was trying to take my mind off him by dating other people, he could scare the guys away. We graduated from school and everyone went their own way. We never lost contact because we could see each other back home whenever he came home for the holidays. David became a good businessman and I was happy for him. A few years back, we met in our hometown for Christmas holidays when our relationship grew beyond friendship. David and I were drunk, and one thing led to another, and we slept together. In the morning, I was feeling ashamed of myself because I had thought I had let myself and him down, but David had explained to me that he had feelings for me since high school, and he thought I didn't like him that way. I told him I had liked him even before we became friends. I just didn't know how to go about it because I was the type of girl he liked. We dated for a year and we got married. Our friends and family kept saying they knew we were going to end up together because of how close we were. It was a beautiful day for us. My mom, Beth, was always in support of everything I did, and he was happy I was getting married to the love of my life. She knew right from the beginning because I always told her everything. So she wasn't surprised when we started dating. After the wedding, we moved into our new house and we started our lives. 2 years into our marriage, David got a job back in our hometown and we had to move. It was his dream to take over the estate management of our hometown, and when he was offered the job, we didn't think twice. I loved our hometown, and the job came at a time when I wanted to have my own restaurant, and it was also so good because we were going to be close to our family. We moved and we settled in quickly. I started looking for a place to set up my restaurant, and my mom helped me in finding a spot close to town. David had resumed his position and he was settling him fine. Things were moving smoothly. David and I continued to go on dates when we had time, and at the end of the date, we could always come back home and sleep in each other's arms as our dreams came through. My mother could invite us to the house for dinner, and we could talk about how we were neglecting or denying our feelings back then. It was always funny. David's parents separated a long time back, and ever since he hadn't seen his mother. His father was around for a while, but he disappeared a few years back, and ever since he had been part of my family, and my parents treated him as if he was their own son. It wasn't long I was able to set up my restaurant in town, and because I was a known chef, people were ready to start trying out my dishes. I opened the restaurant with a lot of local people there, and my business kicked off. Business was moving fine. My husband and I could eat at my restaurant and spend time together before we got back to work. David was also bringing in his clients to my restaurant to have meetings during the day, and also his colleagues usually come around for lunch and dinner. They usually praise me for being such a good chef. The friends I had when we were in school, we reconnected and we started moving together again. Most of us are married now, and we usually meet together to gossip and talk about the latest things happening in town. We went on spa dates, we went on trips together. They had always talked about how shocked they were that I married my best friend, and also because they never saw it coming. But only one of them knew my real feelings, and that was Ruth, my best friend. She was there for me anytime I could cry seeing David with other girls, and so because of that, we understood each other so well. It was really good to be back home after a while. It was a bright morning after we had rain throughout the night, and David and I were getting ready to start the day. David decided that we should get breakfast at the restaurant together. I quickly got ready and we were on our way there. I started to think about how we had settled in already and how it was time for us to have children. I knew that topic was very sensitive for David. Because of how he grew up with love from his parents, he believed he was not going to be a good father to our kids. I didn't want to press him further ever since we had that discussion because I knew it could push him away. All of my friends had children by then, and they were happy. I didn't know what to do about it, and it was eating me up slowly. During the car ride, David had noticed that my mood had changed, and he asked me what was wrong. I wanted to tell him, but I knew it could cause a lot of problems. I concluded in my mind saying I needed to speak to someone who could understand me, and I made plans to invite Ruth over to the restaurant. David and I got to the restaurant, and it was still early for the locals here. Some of my staff were already on duty, but I needed to make the food myself. I made breakfast for us, and we ate while discussing our plans for the day. David had told me that he was going to the city to sort some paperwork for the town, and that he was going to be gone for 2 days. I was already missing him at that point, but he assured me he was going to be back in time. David left for work and told me to take good care of myself. I bid him goodbye and continued with work. I looked at the time and saw that it was already very late in the afternoon, and I had not spoken with David yet. I called him and he told me he was just landing. We spoke for a while and I continued to work. I called Ruth a few hours later and she came over after work. Ruth was a lawyer. She was just always passionate about the law. It was her thing. In college, she was like the mother of the group. She had said we are either partying too much or drinking too much. She was the one that was always cool and collected. I made a late lunch for her. She always liked my cooking back then. I spoke to her over what I was going through concerning David, and she advised me to just give it time, but we had been married for a while now. I was tired of giving him time. She explained to me that if I made the decision of speaking to him and not been cautious about it, I might end up pushing him away. I understood her, and I decided to follow her advice because I knew whenever David was pushed too far, he could shut down and not talk for weeks. The last one that had happened with his parents, he went on without talking for a year. Ruth advised me to take everything easy, that I was somewhat dealing with a child. She then proceeded to cheer me up by telling me about her husband's birthday party that was coming up in a few days. I was very happy for her, and she told me I was in charge of taking care of food for the event. We talked about the guest list for some time, and she left. I began to prepare for the event already because it wasn't very far again. I had met Bill, Ruth's husband, a few years back, and he is such a sweet person, so I was happy I was doing this for them. I finished up and I had to leave because I was very tired, but I asked my staff to close up the restaurant. I got home freshened up and my husband called me. We spoke for some time and he told me his work had been extended. I was not happy about that because I wanted to attend the party with him. I told him about the party and he said I should send his regards. He won't be able to make it. A few days later, I made everything that Ruth had ordered for her husband's party, and I was at the event very early to set everything up. I went there with some of my staff and we were ready for the evening. I quickly went home to go and change for the party. It got ready and I was on my way back to the party. Before I got there, the party was in full swing. I joined them. I looked for Ruth and Bill and I saw them together. I wished Bill a happy birthday and he thanked me for finding time for Carter for the event. I was speaking with Ruth and her husband when I saw someone I thought I was never going to see again. I saw Maxwell, my first boyfriend in high school. I was shocked, and when he came over to greet Bill, I was speechless. I looked at Ruth and she had this apologetic eyes. Maxwell was my first in everything. He tried his much possible best for me to get over David, but it never worked. I used him to make David jealous back then, and it didn't work because David never looked my way. When I finally broke it up with him, he was very devastated. He blamed me for using him and for throwing his love away. He had blamed David back then after the breakup, but I don't think David knew anything about Maxwell. Since then, I haven't seen him, and I kind of still blamed myself for everything that happened, and I never got the chance to apologize to him. After he finished talking to Bill and Ruth, he turned to me and refused to acknowledge me. I excused myself and I went to the restroom. I felt like everything from last time was coming to crash down on me. I went back to the party and I tried to speak with him, but he ignored me. I just wanted to apologize for what I did back then. I was about to leave the party when I saw Ruth running up to me. She explained that she didn't know Maxwell was going to be around, that he just got a new job in town and that was all she knew. I told her to forget about it and not to bother because I already saw she was already worked up. I told her to enjoy the party and we could see later in the week. I got home and I went straight to bed. I left the party because I knew my staff would take care of things. David called me and we talked on the phone. I didn't tell him about Maxwell because I knew there wasn't anything to tell. He told me he was coming back the following day and I looked forward to seeing him. I slept off thinking and praying that David and Maxwell's path do not cross in this small town. Because I do not want any trouble, but I had it in mind that I needed to apologize to him as soon as possible. It's been a few days and David had returned. He went to the office and he was informed that his boss was transferred to another state and she had been replaced by another person. David told me he hadn't seen his new boss and he was hoping the new boss should be someone that saw how much passion he had for his community. David and I got ready and he drove me to the restaurant. He quickly left, saying today was the day his new boss was resuming and he needed to be there on time. We said our goodbyes and he left. I got to work and we began serving our customers. The local people in my community are very lovely. They often have nice reviews about my food and some of them bring fresh veggies for me once in a while. This was what I loved about this town. I was arranging orders in the kitchen when one of my waitresses came and said that a customer wanted to thank me in person. I initially thought it was one of my very good customers, but when I got outside, it was no other person than Maxwell. He told me he had not really enjoyed the meal and he had a bad experience eating at my place. At that time, I knew he was trying to get to me, and I didn't give him the satisfaction. I told him we were sorry and we could improve on our services. He left the restaurant and I felt a sigh of relief because he had become more intimidating. I got back to work and I started thinking, is this how things are going to be now? With Maxwell making life uncomfortable for me, he didn't even give me any chance to explain things to him. He was just cold. I finished my work for the day and I went to see my parents. I got home and I saw that my dad had gone on a business trip. My mom and I chatted for a while and she told me about how she had saw Maxwell in town. I explained everything to her and she said I should apologize to him and move on, and I shouldn't hang it over my head forever. She also advised I tell David everything that happened, and I made plans to tell him everything that evening. I said my goodbyes to my mom and I went home to make dinner for David. I finished up dinner and he came in from work. He freshened up and I asked him about his new boss because he was awfully quiet about it. He told me his new boss was a man named Maxwell and he was making things difficult for him at the office. David felt like his boss didn't like him because of the way he had treated him. I was very devastated when I found out that his boss was Maxwell of all people. I didn't know what to do and I couldn't tell him then that I had a history with his boss that could complicate things the most. I knew David was very troubled because he wanted to make the first impression with his boss, and he didn't know what he had done for him to have treated him harshly. I decided I could go and see Maxwell and give him a piece of my mind because he was just being childish over nothing. The next day, I met up with Ruth and I told her what was going on. I was very angry and I told her I was going to confront Maxwell about it. She told me it wasn't a good idea, but I knew I wanted to do it because he was punishing my husband for something he didn't do. Since I was trying to reach him and it was difficult, I decided that Ruth should be the one to set us up so that I could talk to him. Ruth was feeling reluctant at first, but I convinced her it was for my peace and I needed to apologize to him so he could leave my husband alone. She called him and he agreed to meet up with Ruth. So I went to the restaurant in the middle of the town. I waited for a few minutes before he came. He tried to leave, but I was able to convince him to listen to me. I apologized severally and he told me I was a bad person for using him the way I did. He told me what I did had messed with his head for a long time. I told him he should tell me how I could help him move forward. He said I should go on 3 dates with him. I told him if I did, was he going to leave my husband alone and give him the flowers he deserved in regards to their work, and he agreed. I left there feeling like I had won and everything was going to be all right, but I didn't know I was going ahead of myself and that Maxwell had a lot of tricks up his sleeves. I went home and I told Ruth that I was able to convince Maxwell to let everything go, and she said she wasn't sure it was going to be possible, that she didn't believe he had forgiven me without any catch. I told her the catch was that I was to go on 3 dates with him, and that didn't sit well with Ruth, and I got where she was coming from. I was a married woman who was about to go on a date with my ex that sounded very bad. I went on the date with Maxwell, and he kept making me feel bad about what I did. He kept bringing up the past, and each day I was feeling so guilty sleeping next to my husband, knowing fully well I had just had dinner with another man. I asked David about how things were in the office, and he said that his boss was beginning to warm up to him, and he was happy that at least my efforts were not a waste. I was finally on the last date with Maxwell, and I was happy at least I was going to have my life back now. But I didn't know that Maxwell was going to be sneaky. He told me that the last date was going to be at his house, and I was the one that was going to make the food. I got to his house very early in the evening in order for me to prepare for the dinner. I made food and we had dinner together. I was about to leave when Maxwell pleaded with me to have drinks with him for the very last time. I didn't know he was trying to get me drunk. After a few minutes, I didn't know what I was doing again, and I ended up in bed with Maxwell. In the morning, I woke up with the worst headache ever, and when I was aware of where I was, I found out I was in bed with Maxwell. Everything from the previous day came crashing down on me. I began to cry, and Maxwell tried to stop me from crying, but I did not hear any of it. He promised me he could not mention anything that happened to my husband if I didn't. I was grateful because I knew that could end my marriage. I went back home and I somehow found an excuse for my husband, and he believed me. I couldn't tell anyone what had happened because nobody could believe me. I didn't have feelings for him. David left for work, and I was relieved that Maxwell wasn't going to mention what had happened to my husband, but I was very wrong. David got back from work and he was looking defeated, and I knew I was finished. He told me I should explain to him why his boss was bragging about sleeping with me last night to his colleagues, and I fell down to my feet and started crying. I explained to him how it all started when we were in high school and how I used him to make you jealous, and also how he had appeared weeks ago and was making things difficult for you because of the things I did to him. But David was not understanding where I was coming from. He left the house angrily, and I haven't seen him in a while. My marriage was officially over. Update. Hi, everyone. I'm quite sad to say that my stupid mistake eventually led to the end of my marriage. I trusted my ex in keeping a secret, and my marriage ended. Now me and my husband have gotten a divorce due to the revenge my ex took on me because of what I did years back. I wish I never let my husband down, but I was only trying to protect our marriage, not knowing my ex was out to get me. Right now, it's just my family and my friends that are helping me pick up the pieces of my life. Regret is an understatement in my life right now.
Good day. I don't know if I'll be able to string these words together. My head is a mess at the moment and I don't know how to act. I'm writing this now to see if I can get it off my mind. My pregnant wife has been lying to me for a while now, and I just found out that not only is she lying, she's cheating too. I, 37 male, have been married to my wife, 35-year-old female, for about 7 years now. We have no children, although she's pregnant as I'm writing this. A few months back, I started noticing some changes in my wife's behaviors. She was always a shy, quiet, and all-in-all introverted lady, and that was one of the reasons why I first fell in love with her. We used to cuddle for long hours, without saying a single word to each other, and for someone who's working. Life is very stressful, that was all I needed. But as I said, I started to notice her change. At first I thought it's good that she's starting to come out of her shell, took her 35 years, lol. She started going out more with friends, and she also started staying out long. Before then, my words were a commandment to her. She never went anywhere without my permission. She never did anything too without my permission. Luckily for me, my wife and I cloned each other's WhatsApp account on our phones. I had hers on mine and she also had mine on hers. We did this close to 12 years ago, 6 months after we started dating. It was something of an inside joke born out of seeing the sheer amount of people on the internet who had either been cheated on or duped out of a fortune by the SO. I hardly ever checked it because I trusted her, and she, before now, had never given me any reason not to trust her. But hey, here we are now. When I opened her WhatsApp on my phone, I saw different conversations from men and women that I have never known in my life. Many of those messages were inconsistent, as though she was deleting them. I started to get a little bit suspicious of what was going on. My wife worked for a friend of ours at a gym, so I just shrugged the weird feeling off. Maybe they now have new customers, I thought. Hey everyone. Unfortunately, basically everyone who is watching these videos isn't subscribed. It would mean the world to me to quickly get out of the full screen video for 3 seconds and press that subscribe button. It's free, and you can unsubscribe anytime. Sorry for bothering, and thank you so much if you subscribed. Even though I chose not to think too much about what I saw, I decided to turn on notifications for her messages. Let me see what it is she's deleting before she deletes them. One night, while my wife and I were cuddled up in bed, she got a text on her phone. She checked it, smiled, and headed for the bathroom. Hey, what's that? I asked. Nothing, it's just Haley. Haley was a longtime friend of hers. At first, I went back to bed since it's just Haley, why should I care about their conversation? I wanted to go back to sleep, but I couldn't. I have insomnia. So after staying awake for some time, I decided to just check my phone for a minute. As I was scrolling through TikTok, laughing at memes, I got a notification from my wife's WhatsApp account. It was from a contact saved under my husband. I was wowed. I figured she had saved the number, cause I wouldn't bother checking my messages. Now that I think of it, that was really clever of her. I opened the message. Holy shit. My jaw dropped for what felt like a minute. I scratched my eyes and pinched myself, hoping this was a dream. It wasn't. What did I see? A long history of back and forth messaging from my wife and this random guy, ranging from sharing nudes to talking about how they longed for one another, and sadly, some messages dissed me. How could she? What even annoyed me the most was the fact that whilst I read the chat, more messages were popping up. What do you have on? He sent her, to which she responded saying, just a robe, do you want me to take it off for you? He sent a yes, and after some seconds, she sent him a video of her, touching herself, fully nude, right under my nose. She was doing this right under my nose. I swear I almost cried. It took the will of 1,000 Smiths for me to close that clone app. Minutes later, she got out of the bathroom, got dressed, and headed out. I wanted to follow her, trail her, see who she was cheating on me with, and deal with the both of them. I opted not to, because I knew that with how mad, heartbroken, and pissed off I was, I might have hit Ctrl Z on both their lives. I couldn't sleep that day. I went to the very top of the chat and started reading. From when he first slid into her DMs, she was mad at him for disrespecting me to my face, then mad at me for not doing anything about it. I was confused. I'm normally not one to take disrespect from anyone. As I read on, I found out who it was she was cheating on me with, and if you're guessing Haley's boyfriend, you're 100% accurate. This meth, I thought. I helped him get on Haley's good graces 5 years ago, and this is how he repays me? By screwing my wife? Then it hit me. My wife's pregnancy. Is the baby even mine? Wow. I was grateful to God when we got the news, but now I'm hoping that somehow the kid isn't mine. 'Cause now I decided I was going to leave. I don't really think I need advice here. Maybe if I go back and forth with someone in the comments, I can slowly move on from this. Also, I'm hoping that anyone who sees this and is going through something similar, I'm hoping you find happiness again. Anyway, I went to my lawyer house the next day, being Saturday. See, my lawyer was a childhood friend of mine, and he never seemed to like the woman I gave my surname to. We had discussed the situation. I let him have his "I told you so" rants for a few minutes, then we went down to business. I need a divorce, and I need it yesterday, I told him. I brought him all the documents and asked him to prepare the divorce papers for me, quickly. You're lucky she made you sign the prenup, he said. I guess I was lucky. With the amount of money you have now and that which she earns now, you would have had to pay her off a couple $100,000. Oh my God. I couldn't think straight. I almost fell to my knees in thanksgiving. I thanked God I signed the prenup because, to be fair, I didn't even want to. To give you a rundown, when we were getting married, I was still doing odd jobs while managing my startup company. So I was earning a little above minimum wage while she was making roughly $70K annually. She cited the fact that her company had her in line for management and yada yada yada, so she made me sign the prenup. Well, fortunately and unfortunately for her, when the coronavirus came, her company was one of them that got swept off by the year-and-a-half-long lockdown. It got so bad that towards the end, they couldn't even pay their workers. They owed a lot of money, and she ended up getting let go. On the other hand, the lockdown brought good tidings my way. My startup started to make some money, and I was able to retire from working altogether, as by the time the lockdown got to 10 months, I was already making close to $20K monthly whether I came into the company or not. So, back to the issue on ground. My wife angers me to even call her that now, so I'll call her by the devil's spawn name she was given. After talking about what to do with Lucy for a while, I decided that I was going to stack evidence up. I was going to print out screenshots of both their infidelity. I was going to get videos too. I was going to send it to her parents and to the church. She was a minister at our church, and if the kid isn't mine, I was going to leave. I and my lawyer friend Davis went to the bar to help me cool down. He suggested he helped me bag a shawty to hook up with for the night, which I declined. Hooking up with randoms is what got me into this mess. At the end of the day, I was too drunk to drive, so Dave dropped me off at home. As I sat there, drunk, thinking of how my life, which I had planned to be perfect, had now gone up in flames, I was so distraught. At some point, my hours of thinking, I didn't even know when I brought out a rope, hung it up and sat there looking at it for a while. Looking back at it now, that was the most cowardly thing to do, but then I was ready to bid this shitty life going. I went for a run. When I came back, my wife sat in the parlor crying. I hadn't put back the rope and she had seen it there. She ran to hug me as she saw me walk in, saying how she never knew I was going through something, how I never said a word about my pain to her, how she couldn't believe I would try to take my own life and leave her alone with the kid. I was disgusted by her words. The mere sight of the woman I had loved for over 10 years now started to make my stomach turn. She tried to kiss me, saying everything would be all right. I bowed my head. She thought it was 'cause I was still depressed or whatever. At that moment, I looked her in the eyes and asked her, "Is there anything you want to tell me?" She froze, looking at me like she was trying to read my mind. I repeated the question, "Is there anything you want to tell me?" Could you believe this devil's child tried to gaslight me? Me? How dare she try to play the mind games? "What do you mean?" she asked. "Are you crazy? I'm here crying my eyes out about you wanted to unalive yourself and you have the guts to ask me, 'Is there anything you want to tell me? Is this some sort of a joke?'" she added. After a lot of shouting and arguing, I was even surprised that I didn't let slip that I knew she was cheating. She went up to the bedroom and I starred in the parlor for a while. I have had it up to my neck, so I decided to pour it out here before I try again and succeed this time. Update. Thank you guys for reaching out to me. I planned to update you all, but I came out of retirement like Lionel Messi, LOL. I took the advice of some of you who said I should seek therapy. I was never really a fan of it, but I must say it has helped me a lot in this trying time. I've also started hitting the gym, as is normal in these situations. I'm glad I shared my story because I never really knew what I would have done if I didn't. After that long argument where I left off, we didn't talk for weeks, which was fine by me as I didn't want to see her face anymore. I kept on taking screenshots and piling them up. Also, I put up hidden cameras in the house. Lucy owned the place. I wanted to believe that she didn't bring him over to the house and that they didn't do anything on the bed we shared. Well, let's just say I was stupid for thinking they wouldn't. After one more month, I had loads of evidence. I created a website which I posted all the videos I gathered, from videos of him to videos of hers, to videos of both of them. If you had seen me working on that website, you'd have thought I was creating a porn site. Well, 3 months later, Lucy was in labor. I had drafted all the necessary documents and had filed for a divorce. Her labor was on the day of her cheating partner's anniversary with Haley. Coincidence? I think not. I went over to their place with a copy of the documents and records of the affair. I knocked on the door and was greeted by Haley's. I handed the documents to her and say to her, "Your husband and my soon-to-be ex-wife are screwing each other." Within seconds, her husband came out, unclad but for a towel wrapped around his waist. I guess he didn't hear me at the door. From the look on both our faces, he knew what was going on. "Honey, I can explain, he said. Why do they always think they can explain? In a fit of rage, since I was days away from being free, I rushed at him, swinging. I even thought he would be able to put up a fight, but he wasn't. Such a pathetic, weak man. He was in his early 40s. As he laid on the ground, passed out like a fat man after one round of intimacy. I stood over him, wondering what would make Lucy cheat on me with this peon. As I left, I pulled his hair, taking a few with me. Now to find out if I'll be paying child support or not. I went back to the hospital, the nurses wondering why I had left and why I was walking in blood-fisted and with hair in my hand. I walked straight to one of the midwives, handed her the hair and said, "Take this. Immediately that child is born, run a DNA test with this hair and with my blood sample. Also, if the child is not mine, be sure my name isn't on the birth certificate." I went out again, to the church this time. Luckily, the pastor was on seat. I handed him another copy of the documents. I didn't even have time to see the look on his face. I placed calls, telling my Staub ex-wife's family that I have an important announcement and I want to meet all of them at their father's house. When I got there, they were all waiting for me. I started handing out more copies, from mom to dad, to brother to sister. Everyone got copies. I made to leave, then turned to them. "She's in labor, may be mine, may not be mine." Then I made to leave again. Her younger sister, who weirdly also got cheated on, ran to hug me. She was crying. Her brother shook my hands and said, "Do what you have to do, man. She f***ed up. Feed her to the streets." Her dad walked towards me. A tear in his eyes, he stood in front of me for a while, both of us eyeballing each other. Then he spoke. "You've been the best partner any of my children has had, and you've been my favorite in-law. I know you're going to split from her, and frankly, I'm not asking you guys to stay together. I just want you to know, I didn't raise her this way." He hugged me, and for the first time in this whole ordeal, I cried. I headed home, called Davies, and set up the final phase. The big reveal. I had decorated the whole house with balloons and baby stuff, and hung a big sign on the wall which read, "I know what you did." I went back to the hospital. I had already missed the birth of the child, and this woman who doesn't know we are soon getting separated had the audacity to frown. She wanted to argue with me for missing the childbirth, but she needed her rest. I asked to see the child. The nurse looked at me. She had a sad look on her face. I knew what she meant. The child wasn't mine. I had mixed feelings about it. Happy that I don't have anything that would make me have to see this woman again, and sad that I didn't have a child. I went outside and made more phone calls. I called everyone to come to the house that we were celebrating the birthday of the child. Lots of other people in the neighborhood who knew her and us. I really wanted to crush this woman's whole life. Hours later, the doctor let us leave. I thanked the nurse for not putting my name on the BC and left. She tried to argue with me on the way home, but I stayed quiet. I had her right where I wanted her. On getting home, we were greeted by everyone. I was happy. Everyone was here. Her childhood friends, her work colleagues at her new job as a secretary, some well-wishers from the church. Yes, this was the first time I was happy in a while. I was ready to drink her tears. Davis was inside. I had him turn on the 102's plasma TV in the room and had it displaying the videos of her infidelity. We walked in. Her eyes first went to the big sign on the wall. Then everyone walked in ready for a party of some sorts. Psych. I must admit, ruining her life was probably what made me finally find peace. I had washed her dirty laundry in the open lol. She fainted. I waited for her to awake, then handed her the divorce papers. Davis said to her, "You see, the only good thing about this is you made him sign a prenup thinking he'd want your money. Now you're broke and you're not going to get any divorce settlements." She tried to plead, to hold me in her arms and cry and beg. I laughed and looked at her, then I said, "Remember that day when you found the rope? That day I wanted to end my own life? It was because of you." I gave you a chance to come clean to me, but you decided to pee all over my grave. I was as good as dead then, and you laughed in my face, you mocked me. Well, it's payback time. I looked her in the eyes and said, I'm done, we're done. Then I reached for my pocket, pulled out my phone, blocked and deleted her number right there and then, in front of her and everybody. She was still crying, snort and mucus coming out of her nose and mouth. She looked at me and said, babe, stop. Think about our child. I love you. Don't leave me. Please. I laughed TBH. She didn't know I already tested the kid. I reached again for my pocket, pulling out the DNA results. I placed it on the table. And in true Michael Jackson fashion, I said, but the kid is not my son. As I moonwalked out of the crowd. 2 weeks later. The divorce was final. Very quick, very smooth. I paid nothing, shared nothing, as we didn't even have a joint account. I was free. I saw her only at the depositions. She was a shadow of herself. She wore my clothes to the both of them. It was funny, I swear. Looking at this woman who I loved for 10 years, this woman who, 8 months ago, I would have given my life for without questions, I felt nada. Nada. I won't be updating any further, as I think I have done the story justice. As for how my life is now, I'm just alive in the moment. Davis and I go out once a week to pick up some ladies to hook up with. I've become very fit from the months of living in the gym, lol. So I've become a real ladies' man. As for my ex-wife, I've not heard from her in 3 months. I heard her mum died a few days after I visited. Something, heart failure, I didn't check up. I've continued my therapy, with my therapist very disappointed by my scorched earth revenge. Thank you for reading and responding. I'll take all your judgments and criticism, praise and support in. But hey, as I said, this is goodbye.